I'm not really from the blogging, internet type of generation. I'm kind of old school. And I suppose all that stuff really has some value to it. But as I wrote recently, it really just burdens my heart, you know. You see all these young men blogging and fighting over theological nuances. And in a way, many of them haven't lived long enough to even know or at least experience what they're talking about. And we'll sit there and we'll fill up the internet with this kind of stuff when there's literally billions of people who've not heard the gospel. I mean, it's insane. If you're listening to this and you're a young man, this is probably not your time to write a book and change the world or have a blog that gets hits from all over the planet. This is your time to prepare yourself to become a man of God. Not to be on the internet, but to be alone with God in prayer until He pours out His Spirit on you and makes you a useful servant. And then go out and don't be involved in pouring water on a land that's saturated. Go out with your life and preach the gospel to the nations that don't know Christ. Why be alive? The need is tremendous. But I'm not going to tell you that the need is so tremendous and God won't get it done without you. God will get it done without you. But what a loss. What a loss of joy. You know, I invite you to a life of just real sacrifice and a life of joy unspeakable and full of glory. Some of you young men, you need to think about this. You need to think about going out there and preaching the gospel, suffering for Christ and relishing that suffering. Now, I'm 49 years old and my body is broken into a million pieces. Like Robert Murray McShane said, you know, the Lord gave me a message and a horse, and I've killed the horse. And I feel that way, but I can tell you this, I'm glad. I'm glad. He's worth dying for, young men. And don't waste your life trying to be a theological expert to a bunch of people who already probably know more than you do. Get out there and preach the gospel. Go to the fields. Go to the places where it's dark. Preach the gospel of Jesus Christ. Young men, go somewhere and die, that only God and hell will know your name. God because He loves you, and His Spirit is powerful upon you, and hell because hell hates you. Go somewhere and preach the gospel. Go somewhere where John MacArthur and John Piper are not, and preach the gospel, and pray and intercede. Prayer, enduring, persevering prayer. You know, who cares about what man knows your name? You know, the question is, does God know your name? And secondly, does our arch enemy know your name? Does he hate you with a great hatred? Not because you're some well-known preacher, but because on your knees you fight him. On your knees you wrestle with him. You've grabbed hold. You need to be a man of prayer. And because missions, like India, Nepal, everywhere else, it advances on prayer. You know, there's a few things that I've never heard. I've never heard an old man say that he wished he had spent less time with his wife and children. They always say the opposite. I've never met an old preacher who regretted spending too much time in prayer. But just about everyone I've ever met has regretted not spending enough time in prayer. You know, if you know the Word really well, and Boy, you're just perfect. And your thinking and your logic is pristine. But you're not a man of prayer. You're not worth 2 cents in the kingdom of heaven. You're just not worth 2 cents in the kingdom of heaven. You'll be full of a lot of knowledge and proud and no power. No power. And I pray that you would not jostle for prominence on America's stage. That you'd go and die somewhere for Christ. That your name would be known in heaven. That you'd be a man of prayer. That you'd study deeply, not in order to preach to other brilliant men, but to preach properly to those who have never heard, and to pastors whom God has raised up in foreign lands who've never had the privilege of studying as you have had the privilege to study.